shortest introduction possible so that we can, if you've ever been to Tom Gillaspy, Tom Stinson presentation, there is so much information presented to you at one time that brains tend to shut down and you may start shaking. So rather than give you more information about the wonderful distinguished careers of both of these gentlemen, I will just introduce the one who's here at this point, the retired state demographer Tom Gillaspy, and we'll all hope that when Tom Stinson shows up, you can lead us in a round of applause for his arrival. There's at least 30 different very plausible things that could have gone wrong between where he left and where we are. So we'll hope he arrives, but meanwhile, I think you've given this presentation once or twice, and I'll get out of the way and let you start. Welcome.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. This is actually, am I on? Now I am. Okay. Everybody can understand. Good. Except myself. I don't know what happened to Tom. He's always right there on time, and things are a little bit confused because I accidentally ran off from a class at the University of Minnesota and left my flash drive in the computer there, and that's where the presentation was. But because of modern technology and the fact that we had exchanged these things on phone, I was able to forward the final version to our wonderful technical people, and so voila. So this is an example of technology and why a technology center is a business and technology center is really an essential kind of thing. Okay. Now, if I can just figure out which. Did I do something here? Oh, well, there, yeah, okay. Wrong arrow. Okay. Yeah. What I want to do is, what we wanted to do is to talk about some of the big changes in Minnesota, but I think it's important first to understand just a little bit about where we came from. That Minnesota actually is a remarkably successful state. We're not number one in everything, contrary to what Governor Perkins used to say, but we rank highly in most things, and we do very well. And things like population growth rate, many people are surprised to hear that Minnesota ranks at least among the Frost Belt, has led the Frost Belt along with one of our neighbors, South Dakota, every decade since World War II in population growth rate. We think of, there are people that believe that Minnesota is declining in population, things like that, but no, we are among all of the states in the Northeast and Midwest part of the United States. We continue to be one of the leaders, and we rank highly among many of the social and economic indicators, and always education has been a key aspect to our state's success. We rank well above the national average in per capita income, and we now rank 12th. We actually used to rank a little bit higher, but we rank 12th, and we're about 7% above the national average, and we do very well. And our unemployment rate is always, or almost always, substantially below that of the national level. You'll notice that just in about 2007, 2008, we actually matched up with the nation for a brief period of time. It seems that we went into the recession a little bit earlier than the rest of the country, but we also are coming out of the recession a little bit earlier than the rest of the country, and Minnesota continues to have one of the lowest unemployment rates in the nation. And across many of our social and economic indicators, Minnesota ranks among the top states. We have one of the lowest poverty rates, one of the highest incomes, one of the lowest disability rates, one of the highest percents of our population working, one of the highest in percent of our population with at least a high school diploma, rank highly in percent with a college degree. We rank highly in things like healthiness. We consistently are among the national leaders. We're one of the best places to raise children in the United States. And the new Gallup Healthways poll of happiness and well-being consistently ranks Minnesota as not only one of the happiest, best places in the United States, but actually in the world. This is really a pretty good place to be. We rank very highly. And that success to a large degree is due to decisions made more than half a century ago. Decisions that were made to ensure that our population was well educated. Minnesota was not always a successful state. If we go back to the 1950, Minnesota was a below average income state. We were not the lowest, but we weren't far from it. We were a below average income state, and we were a below average education state. By 1970, we had caught the nation up in education as measured as a percent of our adult population with at least a high school diploma. And now we rank among the leaders in the percent with at least a high school diploma, and our income is substantially above average. Those are actually highly correlated. They go together. The education leads to higher incomes, greater prosperity, lower unemployment rates, and greater success. Basically, half a century ago, wise decisions were made, and Minnesota moved forward in a remarkable way. Things are now changing, and the very core of our economy, the very core of our society is undergoing dramatic changes right now. We are heading towards a new normal. Now, the term the new normal is now considered one of the most hated terms in the world. We will use it a couple times. It was a term that was first coined by Muhammad El-Arian and Bill Gross at an organization called PIMCO, which is one of the largest bond houses in the world. Many of the pension funds of the world use PIMCO to manage their fixed investment portfolios. Many of the mutual funds use PIMCO to invest their fixed portfolio. It is almost certain that at least part of your money is invested by these two fellows, Bill Gross and Muhammad El-Arian. And here's my compadre. Dramatic things are happening in our society, and we are moving to a new normal. This is not a Minnesota issue. This is not even a national issue. This is, in many respects, a global issue, and the next 4 years are going to be very critical. Recent economic and demographic events basically have changed the world for as far out as we can see. You want to take from there?
Sure, let me
And the way we do this is that one of us talks and the other stands around looking uncomfortable, and then we switch.
I think probably Tom was talking and standing around looking uncomfortable both at the same time. Let me apologize. I just got caught in traffic and I had no idea it was going to be as much traffic as there was. Well, We knew that this was coming. This new normal was coming. Tom and I have talked about it for years in terms of the demographics. But what we didn't realize was that it was going to be as accelerated as it was because of the Great Recession. Now, did that turn? Yeah. We've gone through the longest and deepest recession since World War II, and that's accelerated things. It's brought us into a short-term, from a short-term perspective into a long-term perspective. It's created in all kinds of situations where things have been advanced, where businesses have failed more quickly than you might have otherwise, where technologies haven't been adopted more quickly than might have been otherwise. Here you can see a comparison of what's gone on in this recession and the recovery out of it compared to others. And what you can see is that in a normal recession in the past, what we saw was 4 years after the start of the recession, the economy was about 10% greater than it was at the start of the recession. This time, it's less than 1% above. So we've had not only a deep recession, but also we've had a situation where we've had a much slower than normal recovery. Now, it's really only economists that are interested in GDP. What everybody else is interested in is jobs, and here's the picture on jobs. Nationally, we lost 8.6 million jobs. We've regained about 3.4 million, or about 40% of the jobs that we lost since December of 2007. In Minnesota, we've done a little bit better. We lost 159,000. We gained back about 80,000, so we're just a little bit above 50% in terms of the jobs that we've gained back. But the jobs that we lost, the jobs in manufacturing, the jobs in constructions particularly, not all of those are going to come back. We're in a situation where we have people that had skills that were valued by the market and did make them employable, people who wanted and still want to work, but there aren't the jobs there to match their skills. We have a job skills mismatch, and there's more coming. We just can't continue assuming that we're going to return to the old normal in terms of what's going on with employment. Now, there's a lot more about the economy that I could tell you, but the important thing here is not just the economy. The important thing is the interaction between the economy and the demographics. And that's really why Tom and I did this talk together, is because we want to identify the interrelationships between the demographics and the economics and the economics and the demographics. So here's Tom to talk a little bit about some of the demographics that we've seen.
Well, in the short run, the economy exerts very strong influence on demographic trends. And a couple of the demographic trends, well, one thing that happened, that always happens when there's a recession, is that people put off having babies. People put off consumption, buying things when the recession hits. And of course, what's the most expensive thing that you can buy is, a child. And so people put that off. And we've now put that off for about 4 years. And there's a high likelihood that we are beginning to see a little baby boomlet that is occurring right now and will continue into next year. And we will see a whole bunch of babies born in the next couple of years to try to catch up on 4 years of delayed childbearing. That normally happens in a recession. That's fully anticipated. But one thing that has never happened before, one thing that we had never seen before, is that this movement outward that we had been experiencing ever since World War II, this movement out to the suburbs and the exurbs and further out, it just came to an end. That urban sprawl stopped. We've had all sorts of policies to try to slow it down. Nothing helped. Nothing worked. But a little old recession and people quit moving. Well, what happened was that the value of houses went down, and it became more difficult to sell your home. So if you can't get a job and you can't sell your house, you're not going to move. Now, one of the most fundamental characteristics of the United States, and there are two of them that I'm going to talk about, but one of the most fundamental characteristics of the United States that was true before we became a nation, and has been true ever since, is that we are highly mobile and we move to where the opportunities are. That ended in 2008. We're not moving anymore. And mobility rates are at the lowest rate ever, and the fastest growing counties are no longer growing as fast, and counties like Hennepin County are beginning to experience a bit more growth than they had, and Hennepin is now growing at about the same rate as the fastest growing counties in the nation. Well, that's in the short run, but in the long run, demographic trends exert a tremendous influence on the economy, and that's most of what we're going to talk about. Let me ask a question. When did we know that the people born in 1947 would turn 65? Perhaps a better question is, did we do anything to prepare for that day? And I think many would suggest perhaps not so much. A tremendously large generation was born in the late 40s and the 50s and the early 60s, a very, very large generation, and we've seen this coming. We've known that this was coming. And that generation, it's not just the fact that this is a large generation, that generation is followed by a much smaller generation. And that sets up all sorts of interesting dynamics and dramatic changes. And over the next couple decades, virtually all of the population change we are going to see in Minnesota and the United States. This is a national trend as well as a state trend. Virtually all the population change that we're going to see is going to be people 60 and over. And we actually will have fewer people in that Gen X category, the people that 10 years from now will be in their late 40s and 50s. And that is actually a relatively small generation, not just here, but everywhere. And we have a bit larger generation. These are the people that are putting off having babies right now. And it's a bit larger generation. These are the children of the boom generation. This is that generation that you've heard called millennials or the boomerang, or, you know, there's a whole bunch of terms, the baby boomlet. That is a larger generation, yes, but that huge baby boom generation did not replace itself. And so we have a huge generation followed by a very small generation, followed by a moderately sized generation, and that begins to set up all sorts of interesting dynamics. The political climate today, virtually all you're going to hear discussed in the next few months is Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and things like that. And yes, those are issues, and yes, those are things that we need to do something about. But for most of them, Medicare and Social Security, it's not necessarily a sprint. It is a marathon. We don't have to solve Social Security tomorrow. That's not necessary. All we have to do is get on the right path. We know how to do this. We've known what that path was for 50 years. It's time that we get on it. But a more immediate issue, a more immediate dynamic here before all that hits, and something that you're not hearing anybody else talk about, is that the workforce is going to grow at a dramatically slower pace. And the reason why it's going to grow at a dramatically slower pace is that we have an incredible number of people who are approaching retirement. And the number of people retiring is beginning to spike very, very rapidly. Last year, this year, next year, this first half of the decade will be really a retirement boom. And the people who replace them, the high school graduation class, is right now declining in number because it's simply a smaller group of people. And that high school graduation class will decline to about the middle of the decade, and we will not return to our spring of 2008 level of high school graduates until about 2022 or 2023. So the implication of this is that workforce is going to grow in Minnesota and the United States at a dramatically slower pace, so that by the end of this decade, we will be at record low levels of growth in the workforce. And you're probably saying, well, why should I care? And here's why you should care. There's only two ways to grow an economy. Only two ways. And having more Federal Reserve bank notes in your wallet is not one of them. That helps grease the wheels. It's nice. We all like it. It makes commerce move more smoothly. That's not how you grow an economy. How you grow an economy is you either increase the number of people making stuff, that's the size of the workforce, or you increase the amount of stuff each person makes. That's pro-worker productivity. And we've already dialed in that workforce growth is going to be at record low levels. That's already dialed in. That's not going to change. Which means that economic growth is going to depend increasingly on pro-worker productivity. This is not a Minnesota or a U.S. phenomenon. This is a global phenomenon. Europe's problems, when you pick up the newspaper and you notice that Greece is having problems, and Spain and Portugal and Italy and places like that, this is their problem. This is the issue that they're facing. They made promises to people predicated on the notion of a faster rate of economic growth that they'll never be able to attain because their workforce is declining and they're not pushing up pro-worker productivity enough. Japan's workforce has been declining since the late 90s. Their economy has been in a 2-decade-long recession. They're not pushing up pro-worker productivity enough. China is growing very rapidly right now. You remember back in the 70s, some of you can remember back with me, Tom and I can, that's certainly true. We can remember back in the 70s when, gee, if only we could be more like the Germans, everything would be better. And then in the 80s, it was, gee, if we could only be more like Japan, everything would be better. Aren't we glad we weren't? Now it's, gee, if only we could be more like China, everything would be better. Be careful what you wish for. China is growing very rapidly right now. They are experiencing strong growth. They are a younger population than we are. Their workforce is growing rapidly. Their per-worker productivity is pushing up very rapidly. Within 5 years, China will be older than us. Their workforce will begin to decline. And China is going to experience more aging in the next 5 years than Europe did in the last half-century. And by 2027, China's population begins to decline. Remember the one child per family? Oh, okay. This is when it gets to be felt. Dramatic things are happening in the world. Huge things are also happening in places like Latin America and throughout much of the rest of Asia. And you know, there are just dramatic, huge, unprecedented things happening in the world. This is a situation, this aging of the global population has never happened in the history of human societies. Human civilizations have never gone through this before. This is a unique time. This decade will be remarkably unique in the history of human societies. Remarkably unique. And many of the paradigms, many of the beliefs that you have were the old normal. Things have changed dramatically. And things are changing very quickly in the workforce. Manpower Inc. does a study of every year, a survey of businesses around the world, including the United States. And one of the questions they ask is, are you having difficulty filling positions because of the lack of available talent? And in 2010, in the United States, 14% of businesses said yes. 1 year later, in 2011, 52% said yes. Within a month, we will get the 2012 numbers. And things are changing, and things are changing very, very rapidly. This is a rapidly evolving situation. Minnesota is also changing. The Twin City area is changing. The North Hennepin County area is also undergoing dramatic changes. And part of this globalization, part of this change is that we are becoming a much, much more diverse society. And much of our population growth in the recent past and over the next few decades is going to be, it indicates an increasingly diverse population. Historically, Minnesota is one of the least racially and ethnically diverse states in the country. But we're changing. And that change really started first in Minneapolis and St. Paul, and now it is spreading outward with substantial changes happening in the rest of Hennepin and Ramsey County, and also in the suburban counties, and we're seeing dramatic changes in the rest of the state. We are becoming an increasingly diverse state, and Brooklyn Center and Columbia Heights, Robbinsdale area, and Hennepin are seeing dramatic changes in their student populations. We are becoming an increasingly diverse area. Brooklyn Center is now as diverse as, more so than Minneapolis. And part of that increased diversity is in students speaking languages other than English at home. The number of languages are increasing. The number of cultural connections are increasing, and we are changing very dramatically as a society. There is a relationship between diversity and age. Our more diverse, racially and ethnically diverse populations are increasing largely because of immigration and migration from other parts of the world and other parts of the nation. Much of that is related to jobs. Much of it is economic related. Minnesota is still a land of opportunity. We have always been a land of opportunity. That's why people moved here. They didn't move here because of the warm winters. They moved here because there were opportunities. People still come here because there are opportunities. And old people don't move. It's young people who move. And as a result, our populations of color are much younger than our overall population. And our workforce is increasingly an internationalized workforce. And that is largely weighted, I think people are surprised to see this, largely related to increases in education, that we are seeing very strong immigration and migration into our workforce of people from other countries with at least some college to bachelor's degree and advanced degrees.
Well, that's the background. That's where we are. That's where things are going a little bit. But the real question is, where are things going now? What we've told you is that we started out with the old normal, and we had the Great Recession and these demographic changes that were going to come about anyway. So we had all of that go on, and what it's produced is it's produced a new normal. That's where we're headed. The obvious question that you have for us is, well, what does that mean? What's going to happen in the new normal? And unfortunately, the answer that we have for you is we don't know. If we knew, we'd be on the beach at Kona living off the royalties from our book and our newsletter. But here are some things that we think it probably means. First thing, being an economist, of course, you put interest rates pretty high. Interest rates are going to be higher. Now, anybody that's looked at interest rates or looked at the interest rates they're getting on their bank accounts saying to themselves, well, that's not a big prediction. But it really couldn't be much lower, I know. But that's not the whole thing. Economists think they know two things. One of them is that if the Federal Reserve increases the money supply dramatically, it creates inflationary pressures. And of course, the Federal Reserve did increase the money supply dramatically to prevent the Great Recession from turning into the Great Depression Part 2, or federal budget deficits are also likely to create inflationary pressures. And of course, that's what happened as well. And Chairman Bernanke from the Federal Reserve knows this. He doesn't want to be the person that let inflation get out of control. And so as the economy improves, he's going to lean harder against the wind. He's going to raise interest rates more than would normally occur. And that's something you just have to be ready for. Now, that by itself isn't debilitating. It will reduce the amount of capital investment we have in the economy, but it won't slow the economy irreparably. Here's the second thing. Labor and talent are going to become the scarce resources that we have. This is something that may seem strange to be talking about when we have an 8.2% unemployment rate. But as Tom showed you, the demographics are simple and compelling. We are not going to have as many people available in the workforce coming into the workforce as we have going out of the workforce because of retirement. This is something we've never seen before, and it's something we have to be prepared for. And the states and the regions and the institutions that are prepared for that are the ones that are going to be the most successful looking off into the future. We're going to have slower growth, just like Tom told you. You know, we get growth in two ways. We either have more people making stuff, or we have each person making more stuff. And we're not going to have more people making stuff. And so if productivity stays the same, we're going to have less growth. The growth rate's going to be smaller. And that's going to cause a single-minded focus on productivity. That's the only way that we're going to grow at the rate that we want to. That's the only way that we're going to grow, increase output compared to what we have. There's going to be an increasing number of retirees. And that's an opportunity. It's an opportunity, one, we can produce some more productivity by somehow being able to draw upon the job-specific human capital that individuals have. We can keep them working a little bit longer or somehow draw upon their skills. That's the key. It also offers a new opportunity because there's a whole group of people who aren't that old. We're going to have something that they had not had in the future, or in the past, and that's time to do things that they hadn't had the chance to do before. So we need to be able to take advantage of that. We're going to have a more diverse population. You all know that. You're on the front lines really in dealing with that more diverse population. And we're going to have more uncertainty about the future. And the way that's going to show up is that not all of the old rules of thumb, not all of the old assumptions that we used to be able to make are going to hold true. Some of them will, but some of them won't. And the question is, which ones aren't going to hold true and which ones are? Here's one that's in question. You've all heard and been exposed to this, and the idea is that new jobs are the measure of economic success. New jobs, new jobs. How many new jobs are you creating? Didn't get it? Okay. We want to train for the jobs of the future. Where are the new jobs going to be? Well, in truth, the new jobs are going to be less important as employment opportunities than the jobs, the replacement jobs. You can see here for most occupations, replacements are going to outnumber new job growth by about 2 to 1. So we have to be thinking, we have to change our thinking, not where are the jobs of the future going to be, or where are the employment opportunities of the future going to be. We're going to need to see things differently. The Economist in 2008 did a big takeout section on the global search for talent. It was a very good piece, and they stressed that there was going to be great competition globally for talent, for the best and the brightest. But they missed the crucial part, and the crucial part is that it's not just the best and the brightest that we're going to be competing for. We're going to be competing for people at all levels of talent. And that means that we need to make use, the fullest use of the talents of everybody that's coming into the workforce. We need to be thinking where to emphasize our efforts. Now, the McKinsey Consulting Group has done some work, and they're looking at the future. Note that there are 3 types of activities in the workplace. The first kind of job, broad class, is transformational. These are the people that transform iron ore to steel, or steel into cars, or lumber into houses, or trees and cut trees down and create lumber. And that's a declining area. And the second big source of employment, the second big type of activity, is something called transactional. These are jobs that are easily scripted. These are jobs that are service activities primarily. An example that you're all familiar with, or at least most of you would be familiar with, is the woman that used to answer the phone for the Star Tribune, and you want to put your paper on vacation hold. You tell her, and she'd say thank you. And of course, now that's all done by computer voice recognition technology. Those jobs are going away too. And so that's something that we don't need to be concerned about as much. But the real place that we need to be concerned about, the real place that we need to be focused on, the real place that you are playing a primary role in, is for tacit jobs. These are jobs in services or production that require independent judgment and are not easily scripted. These are jobs that the computer can't do because the computer is hung up and requires a choice, an operator choice. So that leads Tom and me to give you 3 R's for business success, for economic success in the 21st century. First R is retention. And here we're going to have to, if we're going to be successful as an economy, as a state, as a region, we're going to have to be able to retain, first of all, our good workers. Businesses are going to have to be very conscious of retaining their good workers because it's going to be harder to attract them from other firms. Second group we're going to have to be sure that we retain is our students, our youth. You know, that's going to be the scarce resource, this talent, this human capital that we'll see looking off into the future. And we cannot allow that set of people, that set of inputs to be lured away to other places. And frankly, we have a problem in Minnesota because unlike some places, there's not a lot of people, 17, 18-year-olds on the beach in California saying, by God, when I get 21, I'm moving to Minnesota. So we have something to overcome. We're going to have to be paying attention to that. We're especially concerned about having the individuals with those tacit skills. The second item, the second R is recruitment. That's just simply going to be job one for everybody because we're going to have to be conscious. And you're going to have to be conscious at it in your institution. We as a state are going to have to be conscious at it because we don't want to lose new faculty. We want to gain those people with those skills and new people coming into the state. And finally, if we're going to have success and productivity, we are going to have to be focused on retraining. We're going to have to be focused on retraining for people that are migrating to the state from other states and other countries. We're going to have to be able to make sure that they have the skills that are reflective of the Minnesota workforce, that they have the skills necessary to be successful in the global economy. We're also going to have to be conscious of the need for retraining for the incumbent workforce, the people that are already in place. You know, about 80% of the people that are going to be working 10 years from now are already working. not just the new students, new entrants into the workforce. We have to be conscious of training. We have to be conscious of training the people that are already in the workforce as well. Back to the economics, Tom told you, here's the economics facts of life. But if you look down below the standard of living depends upon output per resident, there is a caution there. And the caution is if the ratio of workers to residents declines, and of course it's going to decline, we're going to have an increase in the number of people that are dependent upon the workforce, then just to stay even, we have to have even faster increases in productivity than we had in the past. So that's some of the items that you're going to have to be concerned about.
So, productivity, we've mentioned the word productivity several times, and they tell us in the economics graduate school that if you mention productivity more than about 5 times in a presentation, everybody goes to sleep, because they immediately know that what you're really talking about is bigger, faster machines that put people out of work. And of course, that's always part of it. That is part of moving forward. But productivity also means a couple of other things. It means making things better. It means quality. I noticed that Six Sigma was one of the breakout groups today that discussion about making things better, improving the quality of things. And Minnesota has always had a great reputation. If you need a heart pacemaker, do you want Bob's Bargain Basement made parts somewhere in the world? I mean, who knows? But it's cheap. It's cheap. It's half price. Or would you rather have the best in the world, the highest quality, made in the Twin Cities by Minnesotans, which about 80% of all the pacemakers made in the world are made here. And I mean, I know which I would choose. I presume that you would probably also choose the same thing. Quality really counts, and that is a big part of productivity. But quality is not enough. They also have to be innovative. There's a very, very well-known firm out on the west side of the Twin Cities that was the best in the world at Six Sigma. They took Six Sigma and squared it. Nobody could compete with them. Hutchinson Technologies they're the best. They are the best at making one product, which is hard drive suspension systems for your laptop computer. And if the hard drive suspension system fails, your hard drive crashes, your computer is worthless. And so that suspension system, not the most expensive component of the computer, became the essential component of the computer. And so quality really counted, not price. And nobody in the world could compete with them. Now, does anybody have an iPad? What kind of hard drive does an iPad have? Doesn't have one. Oops. The iPad is solid state. There is no hard drive. There is no need for a hard drive suspension system. Innovation. We have to be careful with that. We need to make sure that we are a creative, innovative place, and we need to be prepared to deal with fast-track changes. Focusing just on expenditure cuts may not be enough. It may, in fact, be short-sighted. We may need to invest in things. We may need to invest in different kinds of education. We may need to invest in better business technology centers for our college students, so that we can build that productivity base, so that we can build that innovative kind of environment. Making things better may offer the greatest potential for Minnesota. Making things better, just simply cost cutting is not that's always there. We need to be conscious of our cost. We need to be frugal as best we can, but that's not the only way. And we need to be looking for new ways of doing things. Now, Minnesota is and has been one of the leaders in education, and I said that education is closely tied to income, and the way it's closely tied to income is through productivity. People with more education, training, more specialized knowledge are more highly productive workers and command a higher wage. But we have a concern that we see very large and substantial differences in high school graduation rates in Minnesota by race and ethnicity groups. And the Latino and Black or African American children, that's where our biggest growth is in K-12 education right now. That's where our biggest growth is, and we're only graduating about half of these kids from high school. And, you know, high school isn't hitting a home run. You know that. You need a couple years of education beyond high school at least to command a good job. But if you don't make it through high school, you haven't made it to first base. You're out. You're out of the game. You have to at least make it through high school so that you can even come to North Hennepin College to take those advanced courses that will lead you to a better world. And you know, it's not just you know, and those rates 50%, that's unacceptable. That's just absolutely unacceptable. But right now, 92% of our adult population has at least a high school diploma, and among the gold bars, I don't see any 92s. We're not doing very well for any of our children today. Our education standards are diminishing, and we need to change this around. The bar for technology the bar for knowledge is being driven by productivity, by this imperative for productivity all over the world, and that is raising the bar of knowledge for being a good worker, and we are acting as if the bar is being lowered. The bar is not being lowered, it is being raised, and that is happening on a global basis. Minnesota is one of the most education-intensive workforces in the world. Today, 70% of our jobs require at least some college education. I would argue that 100% of all the new jobs over the next 2 decades will require at least some college. Not necessarily a college degree, can be a year or two specialized training, specialized knowledge, but it's going to require something beyond high school. What is happening in the new normal is the whole nature of the skills and abilities that people need are changing. We no longer do back-breaking work. We no longer dig ditches with shovels. We have backhoes. We have bulldozers, things like that. We have machines that do that. We no longer have people, massive numbers of people standing around scanning barcodes. Well, we do have some of that, but those numbers are diminishing, and there's more and more check-out-yourself lanes. There's more and more alternatives to this. There's more online retailing. We are seeing retail jobs dropping like a rock worldwide. It's not just here. This is happening globally. These jobs are diminishing on a global basis, and they're not going to come back. They are not going to come back, and we have trained our children to be retail clerks. We've trained them for a dead-end world. We need to train them for a very different kind of world, and the nature of things is changing very rapidly.
Well, you can see that there's an economic content to this as well. You're better educated, and you earn more. And this is Minnesota earnings by education. And so it's important for the individuals, but it's really important to us as a society as well. So that's the story. And there's a question I'm sure that you all have. And the question is, this is going to cost some money. Can we afford it? We turn the question around and say, can we afford not to be able to afford it? That's the question. Actually, we're in a fiscal catch-22. We're in a situation where if we don't make the the necessary investments in human capital, in workforce development, in research, and in infrastructure, then we won't have the productivity gains in the future that we need to allow us to make further investments in human capital, research, and infrastructure. That's the problem. That's the situation that we're in. We're in a fiscal catch-22. Clearly, we're in a non-sustainable position. We can't go on like we have. I don't know if Tom told you this or not, but those front slides that we had that said that Minnesota has done really remarkably well. If you would have looked at them 5 years ago, it would have looked better. It's not that we're deteriorating, but we're not keeping up quite the way that we were. We're not doing quite as well as we were before. So we're in an unsustainable situation. Herb Stein, who was President Nixon's chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, and who also was the father of Ben Stein, the guy that did Ben Stein's money and was on CBS Sunday morning, had this to say about unsustainable situations. What he said is, if something can't go on forever, it will stop. So we're going to stop. The old normal has stopped. We're in the new normal. And really the question is, what do we do? How do we take advantage of it? Or do we not take advantage of it and fall by the wayside?
Well, Professor Stein's a very negative way to leave you. So what I'm going to do is leave you with a quote from a famous Canadian philosopher. You didn't know there was one. Famous Canadian philosopher who also played a little bit of hockey. For those of you who don't know, Wayne Gretzky scored more goals as a professional hockey player than any other player in history. He was a goal-scoring machine. And he was asked one time, well, Wayne, how is it that you can score so many goals? And he said, well, I skate to where the puck will be, not to where it has been. And you think, well, okay, that's a pretty typical jock kind of statement. But actually it's pretty brilliant. Because he can close his eyes and know where the puck's going to be. What a remarkable ability to see into the future. To see the future. He can close his eyes and he knows where it's going to be. And here's the remarkable thing. We know where the puck's going to be in 10 years. We knew 30 years ago where the puck was going to be today. We know where the puck's going to be in 10 years. Most of us, and this is an essential demographic theory that's at the core of everything, most of us age somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 year every 12 months. It's pretty regular and fairly predictable. We know where the puck's going to be in 10 years. So that just leaves us with one other thing. What do we do with that? And Gretzky would say, I skate to where that puck's going to be, I put my stick on the puck, and I score the goal. And that's all we have to do. We know where the puck's going to be. All we have to do is skate to that point, put our stick on the puck, and score the goal. And education is at the very core of all that. Thank you.
Thank you for finding the time to be with us. It's a perfect talk for a celebration of a new investment and also a great reminder that the puck stops here. We provide the retraining. As you know, this building houses our customized training center, so we're here to provide training for the new workers who need the new skills, and we're here to provide opportunity for students.